My name is Emily Carter, and last winter, my mother smirked across a Sunday dinner table and told me they used my insurance check to buy my sister Rachel a new car. 3 months later, I stood at the courthouse steps, handed Rachel the keys to that same Honda, right before the sheriff seized it under court order. If you've ever been betrayed by your own family, tell me in the comments where you're watching from, because this story might feel too real. Sunday dinners at my parents' house had always been loud, messy, familiar. The kind of gathering where mismatched chairs circled a table groaning under the weight of casseroles, store-brand sodas, and whatever dessert Rachel burned and Mom pretended to love. We did this every week like clockwork, ritual over intimacy. But that night, something in the air felt off. The air conditioning rattled louder than usual, or maybe it was just me holding my breath. I had just set my purse on the bench near the door when my mom called out, "Dinner's on, Em," from the kitchen. She always said that like she was doing me a favor. Rachel was already seated, scrolling on her phone with her long polished nails clacking against the screen like she was too busy to breathe. Dad was at the end of the table, silent, spooning mashed potatoes onto his plate without much appetite. I slid into my usual chair and reached for the tea pitcher, pouring myself a glass before I asked casually, "Did the insurance check come yet?" Mom's fork paused in midair. Rachel's head didn't even lift, but it was Mom's smirk that made my stomach turn. "Oh, it came," she said brightly. "We finally bought Rachel that Honda. Isn't it beautiful, pearl white, heated seats?" I blinked. At first, I thought I'd misheard. "You what?" I said slowly. Rachel looked up then, grinning like a cat with cream on her chin. "It's parked out front. Didn't you see it when you pulled in?" "That was my car," I murmured. My voice came out quiet, but it didn't feel weak. It felt dangerous. Mom laughed, actually laughed. "Oh, honey, don't be dramatic. It was insurance money. You don't even drive that much." My hands clenched under the table. "I wasn't asking about a car," I said. "I was asking about the health insurance payout." Now it was Dad's turn to look up, his eyes flickering toward Mom in confusion. She shifted in her chair. "Emily," she said sharply, "there's no need to ruin dinner." "You spent the entire payout on Rachel's car?" I asked, louder now. "You didn't read the results that came with it." "What results?" Mom asked, suddenly stiff. Rachel rolled her eyes. "Here we go again." I reached into my purse, pulled out a folded envelope, and tossed it onto the table like a grenade. "That's what I was trying to ask," I said flatly. "Because the hospital sent the results with the check, you must have tossed it in the trash when you were ripping open the envelope." Dad leaned in slowly, his hands trembling as he picked it up. "Emily," Mom said, her voice uncertain now. "What is this?" I looked her dead in the eye. "They're Dad's results. Early-stage lung cancer, marked urgent. You used the money for leather seats while your husband's dying." For a moment, everything stopped. Even the kitchen clock on the wall seemed to go silent. The kind of stillness that happens when truth detonates a lie so thoroughly that no one remembers the script. "Wait," Dad whispered, staring at the name on the report. What is this?" Mom reached for the envelope with shaking hands, skimming the paper with growing horror. Her lips moved soundlessly over the words as color drained from her face. "I never saw this," she whispered. "Emily, why didn't you say anything?" I laughed, short, cold. "It didn't feel like me. Because I've been paying half that premium for 3 years. You never even asked why. You just cashed the check and took a joyride in Rachel's car." "Emily, please," Mom began, but I stood up. "No," I said. "Enjoy your Sunday dinner. Tell Rachel to drive you to the hospital next time." Then I turned, walked out the front door, and left the taste of mashed potatoes and betrayal behind me. I didn't sleep. Instead, I sat in my apartment with the kitchen light on and a blanket wrapped around my shoulders, watching dawn crawl across my blinds like it owed me an apology. My phone stayed quiet, no calls, no texts. Not even from Rachel, who usually posted passive-aggressive quotes on her story whenever someone sneezed the wrong way. I didn't expect an apology. Not from them. But I did expect fallout. At 7:13 a.m., I got a text from my neighbor across the street. "Your mom's digging through your parents' trash like she lost a winning lottery ticket." I didn't respond. Just grabbed my keys, tossed on a sweatshirt, and drove over. The street was quiet, dew still clinging to the grass. My parents' modest beige house looked the same as always, but the woman half submerged in the green garbage bin outside did not. My mother, Ellen Carter, queen of appearances, who ironed her church blouses and double-washed the windows before every holiday, was elbow-deep in banana peels and junk mail. She was muttering to herself, wild-eyed and disheveled in a housecoat I hadn't seen since I was 15. As I pulled into the driveway, her head snapped up like I'd caught her committing a crime. Maybe I had. "You," she snapped, stumbling toward me with a crumpled envelope in hand. "How could you not tell us? How could you keep something like this from me?" I got out of the car slowly. "Funny," I said. "I could ask you the same thing." Mom waved the envelope like a white flag that had already surrendered. "These results, why didn't you say anything last week? Last month, when did you find out?" I leaned against the car, arms crossed, watching her spiral. "The day the payout was issued. I was supposed to bring the results over with the check, but Rachel's car emergency got in the way, remember?" "I didn't know," she said. "Emily, I didn't see this, you didn't tell me." "Because you never asked," I said quietly. "Not about Dad's test, not about the money I've been helping you pay for that policy with, not about anything." She flinched like I'd slapped her. "I thought you were just being cold last night," she muttered, eyes down. "I thought you were punishing Rachel, I didn't realize that Dad was sick," I cut in. "That I've been carrying this on my back while you were test driving sedans." "I didn't think we were taking it from you," she said. "It was insurance. I thought it came from the policy, not your—" "I am the policy," I said sharply. "Or at least half of it, and I made sure it included early detection screening, which is why those results even exist." She looked at me then, really looked. And for a second I thought I saw something break. Maybe pride, maybe denial, maybe both. "You didn't have to do that," she said. But it came out weak, like she knew it wasn't true. I shook my head. "I knew you wouldn't." We stood there like that for a minute, me in the driveway, her in the sunlight, still holding a trash-smeared envelope containing the words early-stage lung cancer, urgent follow-up required. She looked smaller than I remembered, or maybe I was just taller now in ways she'd never noticed. "I'll make the appointment," she whispered. "You should," I said, "soon." "I didn't mean to ignore it, Em, I didn't know." "I believe you," I said, and weirdly, I did. I believed that she hadn't read the report. I also believed she hadn't cared enough to wonder what was inside. That was the part that hurt more. She took a step toward me as if to hug me, but I didn't move. Instead, I asked, "Where's Dad?" She glanced toward the house. "Still sleeping, he doesn't know yet." "Then maybe this is your chance to tell him before Rachel spins it her way." A flash of guilt crossed her face. She nodded. "I'll take care of it." "Good," I said, turning back toward the car. As I opened the door, she called after me. "Emily, we'll figure this out. As a family." I paused, just long enough to say, "Yeah, we'll see." Then I drove off. But the words echoed longer than they should have. As a family. The same family that forgot whose name was on the check, whose money paid for the policy, and whose test results nearly ended up in a landfill. Tuesday morning smelled like cinnamon toast and manipulation. I walked into my parents' kitchen just after 9 a.m., already bracing for the performance I knew was waiting. The windows were open, letting in the late spring breeze, and the table was suspiciously set for 3 plates, silverware, folded napkins, like I'd been invited to a meeting, not a meal. Mom stood at the counter, shuffling through a pile of papers, hospital estimates, I realized. Dad wasn't in sight yet, but I could hear the television murmuring from the back den. Rachel's Honda was parked sideways in the driveway like always, sparkling from what I assumed was a new detail job. "You're here," Mom said, without looking up. I sat down, my chair screeching slightly across the linoleum. "I said I would be." She placed the papers down gently in front of me, smoothing the corners like they were precious. Like the numbers printed there weren't weapons she was about to use. "These are the initial estimates," she said. "The specialist Dad needs is out of network. We're looking at about 14,000, maybe more depending on post-op recovery." I didn't flinch. I didn't ask why she was telling me this instead of Dad. Instead, I picked up one of the sheets, scanning it slowly. The numbers were brutal but clear. Lung cancer didn't care if your checking account was empty. She waited a beat before adding, "You're going to help with the surgery, right?" There it was. No build-up, no apology, just a demand draped in soft tone. I put the paper down. Before I could answer, a loud voice boomed from the hallway. "Help with what?" Dad stomped into the room, his slippers dragging slightly but his posture still strong. He looked more awake than I expected, maybe even ready for a fight. "She's helping with the hospital bills," Mom said quickly. "No, she's not," Dad snapped. "She already refused to help with the car, now she won't help with this either, selfish." The word hit like a slap, not because it was loud, but because it was practiced. Like he'd rehearsed it, I turned toward him, calm, precise. You spent the money, not me, I said. I didn't touch that insurance payout, I didn't buy Rachel a car, I didn't ignore the envelope marked urgent with your name on it. His face flushed red. Don't twist this. I'm not twisting anything, I'm laying it out. I leaned forward, voice even. You had a safety net, you spent it. Now you want me to be the net under the net. You're our daughter, Mom said sharply. Family helps each other. I almost laughed, almost. You mean like how I've been helping for 3 years, paying into a policy none of you read, or the way Rachel helped herself to a brand new car while Dad's lungs are failing. She needed that car to get to work, Mom said, her voice rising. Then maybe she should help pay these bills instead of asking me. Dad turned to the fridge like he couldn't look at me anymore. His voice was quieter now but still bitter. I never wanted to ask you. But I didn't think you'd turn your back on us. I stood up. I'm not turning my back, I'm standing up straight for the first time. Silence, long and jagged. Then I added, softer this time, if you'd told me about your diagnosis, if you'd come to me first before spending the check, this would be a different conversation. You're punishing us, Mom whispered. No, I said. I'm protecting myself. I walked to the door, my heart pounding in my ears. I had almost made it to the porch when Mom called after me. We talked to a lawyer. That stopped me cold. What? You're living in the condo downtown, the one we helped you buy, she said carefully. We put your name on the down payment memo. I turned back slowly. I'm sorry, what are you implying? You're acting like we owe you everything, Dad said from behind me. But we helped you get that place. You think you're untouchable, but you're not. The last word stung. Not because of what he said, but because of the look in his eyes. Rachel's voice floated down the stairs at that moment, chipper and detached. Oh my God, are you guys fighting again? It's like barely 10 in the morning. I didn't answer her, I just left, because I knew what that sentence meant. What those words were carefully building toward. That night as I sat in my condo trying to breathe through the aftermath, a courier showed up at my door. Legal documents, from my own parents. They were suing me. Claiming partial ownership of my condo, asserting that they'd financially supported my mortgage, that I had misled them. My hands shook as I flipped through the papers, but my mind was clear. They weren't just asking for help anymore. They were coming for everything. I didn't cry. Not when I read the lawsuit. Not when I called off work the next morning with a voice that sounded steadier than it should have. Not even when I Googled the words family civil suit and felt like the loneliest person in the state of Oklahoma. But I did cry in the elevator. The one in the old sandstone building downtown, where the law firm plaque gleamed a little too brightly and the floor buttons lit up with a sound like judgment. The tears came fast, quiet, sharp, embarrassing. I swiped them away with the sleeve of my blazer, not because I wanted to hide how I felt, but because I was tired of giving my family any more of me than they'd already taken. Ms. Denning's office was on the 5th floor. Walnut paneling, bookshelves like towers of quiet authority, and a single photo on her desk of a Labrador in a Christmas sweater. I liked her instantly. You must be Emily, she said, standing to shake my hand. Let's get to work. I slid the folder across her desk. It was thick bank records, mortgage statements, email threads, even text messages with my realtor confirming that the down payment had come solely from my savings. I'm being accused of stealing my own life, I said, voice brittle. They're claiming they funded the condo. And did they? I shook my head. They gave me a congratulations card and a kitchen towel, that's it. She opened the folder, flipping through with sharp, practiced fingers. These are solid records, she said. Timelines tight. The funds came from your work account, consistent withdrawals over a period of 2 years. She tapped one page. This email from your bank's loan officer seals it. You were the sole borrower, sole owner, and the title confirms that. I knew it was clean, I said quietly. But they said they talked to a lawyer, that I owed them. Ms. Denning snorted. Honey, talking to a lawyer doesn't mean you're right. Sometimes it just means you're scared. For the first time in days, I smiled. She reached into her drawer, pulled out a crisp stack of papers, and handed them across the desk. This is a counterclaim. We're going to file it alongside a motion to dismiss. You'll keep your condo, and if they want to press the issue, they'll have to explain to a judge why they're submitting forged receipts with no actual transactions to back them up. I blinked. Forged receipts? She turned her monitor toward me. I ran a preliminary check. The documents they submitted, fake, badly. I've seen Etsy invoices with more credibility. A slow warmth spread through my chest, not joy exactly, but something close. Relief's older, smarter sister. You're saying I have a case, she smiled. I'm saying they don't, and we're going to show the court exactly how far they've gone to cover up the truth. I leaned back in the chair and exhaled for the first time in what felt like weeks. So what now? I asked. Now, she said, sliding the counterclaim toward me with a pen. Now you stand your ground. I signed my name. The letters felt heavier than usual. Ms. Denning gathered the papers and placed them in a sleek black folder. I'll file this by the end of the day. You'll get a copy in your email. And in the meantime, she paused, tilting her head slightly. Don't answer any more of their calls. Let them scream into the void. As I stepped out of her office, clutching that folder like armor, I felt something shift. They wanted a war. They were about to get a reckoning. The next morning started quiet. Just me, my chipped mug, and the low hum of the city outside my condo window. I was halfway through my second cup of coffee when the phone rang, an unfamiliar number, Tulsa area code. Ms. Carter, the nurse asked. Your father was admitted last night. Chest pain, elevated vitals. He's stable now, but we thought you should know. I closed my eyes for a moment, pressing 2 fingers to the bridge of my nose. Is my mother there? She left a few hours ago. Said she'd be back later this afternoon. He's resting. I thanked her and hung up, and just sat there for a while, staring at the quiet drip of my coffee pot, thinking, now they'll come back. Now they'll try again, just with different weapons. I didn't have to wait long. By noon, someone buzzed from the front entrance. I let the camera load before I answered. And there she was, Rachel, holding a wrinkled tissue in one hand, sunglasses perched on her head like she'd walked off a boutique ad, but her face was streaked with tears, or at least the remnants of them. I debated pretending not to be home, but I'd spent too long letting other people's emotions dictate my actions, so I opened the door. Please don't slam it in my face, Rachel said, stepping inside before I could even respond. I'm not here to fight. I crossed my arms. That's a change. She looked around my place like she hadn't just tried to sue me for it. It's really nice in here. I forgot how cozy it is. Rachel, I said flatly. She sniffled and dropped onto the edge of my couch like it owed her something. Dad's not doing great. I know, I replied. The hospital called me. Unlike you, I gave them my actual contact info. Her mouth twitched like she wanted to argue but couldn't. The surgery, it's more expensive than we thought. Mom's trying to figure out a payment plan, but the doctor said it can't wait long. And she paused. I came to ask if you'd consider selling the condo. I blinked. For a second I actually thought she was joking. You're serious? Emily, please, she said, standing suddenly, all urgency and messy desperation. It's just a place. Dad's our father. He needs this surgery. I know things have been complicated, but… Sell the condo, I interrupted, barely above a whisper. She kept talking. You could move somewhere smaller, or rent for a while. You don't have to live like this forever, but right now he needs help, please. I walked over to the window, staring out at the rust-colored bricks across the street, my hands clenched around the windowsill. Rachel, I said, turning slowly. I'm going to ask you one question, and I want you to think before you answer. She nodded, eyes wide, lip trembling just enough to look strategic. Where's the car? Her brows knit. What? The Honda, I said. The one you bought with my insurance payout. The one you drive to work and brunch and wherever else you need to be seen. The one with the leather seats and the backup camera. She swallowed. It's parked outside. So sell the car first, I said, calm, clear. She stared at me, frozen in place. What? You're standing in my condo, I said, which I paid for alone. You drove here in a car you bought with money meant for our father's health. And now you're asking me to give up my home while you keep the thing that got us here. It's not that simple, she whispered. It is, I replied. Sell the car first. Her face contorted, a mix of shame and rage, the kind you wear when you realize the trap you helped set is finally snapping shut. You really don't care if he dies, do you? She spat. You'd rather let him suffer than give up a condo. No, I said softly. I care that my father didn't think twice before suing me. I care that my own sister watched it happen and said nothing. Tears welled in her eyes again, but this time I didn't believe them. I thought you'd understand, she whispered. I do, I said, opening the door. Better than you think. She stepped out without another word. And this time I was the one who closed the door first. Some people prepare for court by panicking. I prepared with folders, late nights, and silence. The week before the hearing, my living room transformed into a war room, papers everywhere, sticky notes lining the table, highlighters strewn like confetti. Ms. Denning had sent me a trial prep packet labeled Respondent Evidence Package Carter v. Carter. Seeing my name split like that on legal documents made my stomach turn. I wasn't sleeping much, but I was thinking, and rehearsing, over and over, facts first. Feelings later, bank records, titles, emails. The truth was my shield. And for once, I wasn't letting guilt pry it out of my hands. Most nights, I'd sit on the floor with my back against the couch, flipping through my notes while the news murmured in the background. The city felt so far away, its lights blinking like distant signals from a world that hadn't tried to ruin me. But the worst part of those nights wasn't the silence. It was the memories. The way Dad used to sneak donuts to me before dinner when Mom wasn't looking. The time he taught me how to check the oil in my first car, laughing when I spilled half of it on the driveway. For a long time, I believed I was his favorite. But now, I wasn't even sure I was his daughter in his eyes. Not after what he said in the kitchen. Not after the lawsuit. And yet, despite everything, I found myself driving past the hospital one night. I didn't go in. I couldn't. Instead, I pulled into the lot across the street and watched the windows glow from afar, wondering which one he was behind. The lights on the 8th floor flickered, then steadied. I thought about his voice in that kitchen, full of disdain and accusation. "You're selfish. This is your family." That word, selfish, had echoed for days. But tonight I let it go. I whispered to no one, "I'm done being your scapegoat." And I meant it. Back at home, the family group chat pinged with a new message. "Mom, surgery scheduled for Friday morning. They're optimistic, he's stable." No one addressed the lawsuit. No one apologized, just quiet logistics and emoji prayers. I didn't reply, not because I didn't care, but because I cared too much for too long without any of it being returned. Thursday night, Ms. Denning and I met one last time before the hearing. We sat in her office, surrounded by thick files and legal pads. "Do you feel ready?" she asked. I nodded. "I'm as ready as I'll ever be." "Good," she said, sliding the final folder toward me. "They're going to paint you as cold, ungrateful, entitled, but none of that changes what's on paper." "I know. And Emily," she added, softening for the first time, "you're not selfish, you're strong, there's a difference." I swallowed the lump in my throat and forced a nod. I wasn't here for validation. I was here for truth. That night, I didn't sleep at all. Instead, I watched the clock change minute by minute and promised myself, whatever happens tomorrow, I will not let them take one more inch of me. Not my home, not my peace, not my name. The courthouse smelled like old paper and polished wood. I'd never been inside one before, not for myself, not for anyone. But the moment I stepped through security, with my carefully packed documents clutched in a slim leather binder, I realized something bone deep. This wasn't about money anymore. This was about visibility. I was finally going to be seen. Courtroom 3B was cooler than I expected, the kind of cold that seeped into your fingertips. My heels clicked too loud on the tile floor as I walked toward the respondent's table. Ms. Denning was already there, calm as ever, flipping through a yellow legal pad. Across the room sat my mother and Rachel, shoulders squared, lips tight, avoiding my gaze like it burned. Rachel wore a navy blazer I'd never seen before, her nails perfectly manicured, no trace of the tearful driveway version of herself. My father wasn't there. Still recovering from surgery, I assumed. Somehow, his absence felt louder than if he'd shown up in handcuffs. The bailiff called the room to order. The judge entered, Honorable Matthew Adler. Late 50s, sharp eyes, reputation for cutting through drama like a surgeon. He read through the initial complaint aloud. The plaintiffs allege that Ms. Emily Carter owes partial equity in a downtown condominium, citing familial financial support during acquisition. I sat still. Face neutral, pulse slow, then it began. My mother took the stand first. In a voice polished with forced calm, she described years of support, claiming she and my father had contributed to my financial stability through advice, occasional cash gifts, and moral encouragement. Moral encouragement, Ms. Denning whispered beside me, scribbling something that looked suspiciously like a smirk on her notepad. Then came Rachel. She flipped her hair before swearing in, gave the jury box a polished smile even though this was a bench trial. She leaned in when she spoke, like she was pitching a startup instead of rewriting family history. "Emily was never appreciative," she said, voice trembling just enough to sound rehearsed. She always acted like she did everything alone. But we were there for her, especially Mom and Dad. Without their help, she never would have gotten that condo. She sniffled once. No tears came. The judge raised a brow. Did you provide any funds toward the down payment, Miss Carter? Rachel blinked. Not me personally, but I know my parents did. I remember my mom writing a check around that time. Ms. Denning rose slowly. Permission to present Exhibit D. The judge nodded. She handed over a packet, copies of my bank statements, email threads with the mortgage broker, my loan approval showing no cosigner, and a scanned image of the actual cashier's check. My name, my account. Exhibit D clearly shows Ms. Carter independently financed her home, Denning said. No cosigners, no secondary deposits from the plaintiffs, no shared ownership of any kind. Judge Adler flipped through the pages. His eyes narrowed slightly. This check came directly from your account, Ms. Carter. I stood, yes, Your Honor, I said clearly. Every cent came from me. My mother's mouth dropped open slightly. Rachel turned bright red. Denning continued. Additionally, we have evidence that contradicts claims of ongoing financial support. She tapped her folder and began reading aloud. Utility bills paid solely by me, texts from Mom asking for help with groceries, bank transfers, going from me to them over several years, and finally, a transcript of a voicemail where my mother thanked me for covering the insurance premium again this month. God knows we couldn't. A quiet settled over the courtroom like fog. Plaintiffs, the judge said, turning to my mother and Rachel. Do you have documentation supporting your claim that you funded the property? My mother scrambled with a folder, flipping through sheets like truth would magically appear between the lines. She held up a printout, an old bank statement with a single $300 withdrawal circled in red. This, she said, voice suddenly thin, was for Emily. She needed help with moving expenses. The judge stared. And you're claiming this entitles you to partial ownership of a property valued at over $200,000. We helped her emotionally too, she mumbled. Help is not equity, the judge said flatly. He turned to me. Ms. Carter, do you have anything else to add? I nodded once and stepped forward, hands steady. For years, I said, I helped them. I paid into their insurance, covered bills, sent money when they asked. I never asked for repayment. But the moment I stopped saying yes, suddenly I was selfish. And now they want my home. I turned toward my mother and Rachel. I would have given you everything, I said, voice shaking now not from fear but truth. But you tried to take it instead. Silence. Even the air in the room seemed to wait. The judge tapped his pen once. Twice. Then said simply, judgment in favor of the respondent, case dismissed. I didn't smile, but I did exhale. Ms. Denning patted my hand once. Told you, she said, eyes still on the plaintiffs. We had them right where we wanted them. As we gathered our things, I didn't look back at Rachel or my mother. I didn't need to. I'd already said everything I needed to say. The verdict paper was still warm in my hand when my phone rang. Unknown number, Tulsa area code. I almost didn't answer. But something, maybe that old reflex to brace when the past calls, made my thumb hover and click. Emily Carter, the voice said. Yes. This is Nurse Preston at St. Margaret's. I'm calling about your father. There's been a complication post-surgery. He's conscious, but his condition has worsened. We need a family member present to speak with the doctor. My heart dropped into my stomach. What kind of complication? A secondary infection. He's stable for now, but it's serious. We've notified your mother, but we wanted to ensure someone else was informed in case she didn't finish. I didn't ask her to. I thanked her, ended the call, and just stood there for a moment in the courthouse hallway, still holding the judgment that proved I was right, while the man who called me selfish might be dying. I didn't cry. I didn't collapse. I just existed in the in-between space where vindication and devastation meet and can't look each other in the eye. Ms. Denning had gone to file some post-judgment paperwork, but when she returned and saw my face, she didn't ask questions. Go, she said. I'll handle the rest. I made it to St. Margaret's in 15 minutes flat. Outside the ICU doors, I spotted them. My mother sitting slumped in a plastic chair, clutching a crumpled tissue like it was the only thing keeping her together. Rachel standing, arms crossed tightly over her designer coat, pacing like the ground owed her an apology. They both looked up as I approached. I didn't even get a full step into the waiting area before Mom stood up and said, loud enough for the nurses to hear, "You see what you did." Rachel closed her eyes. "Mom, No, don't defend her now, Mom snapped. We were supposed to be there today with him, not in court fighting over money, but you dragged us away while he was recovering. I kept my voice level. He was the one who signed the complaint. He could have stopped it any time. He was confused, she hissed. He didn't understand the paperwork. He thought it was just a formality. No, I said firmly. He understood. You all did. You wanted my home. Now you want my guilt. She stepped back like I'd slapped her. You're heartless, she whispered. No, I said, I'm tired. Rachel finally spoke. He's asking for you. That knocked the air from me harder than the accusation had. I looked between them, my mother glaring with wet eyes, my sister watching with something almost like regret, and I walked past them without another word. Inside, the machines hummed quietly. My father looked smaller in the hospital bed, his face pale, lips cracked, but his eyes opened as I stepped in. He didn't say anything at first, just stared, like he wasn't sure if I was real. I'm here, I said softly. He tried to sit up but winced. They told me you won. I did, he blinked. Good. That single word cracked something inside me. I never wanted it to get this far, I admitted. But you pushed, all of you. He nodded slowly. I thought I was protecting what we built. I didn't see what I was destroying. A nurse stepped in with a clipboard. Just a moment, then he needs rest. I gave him one last look. You almost died hating the one person who tried to save you, I said quietly. Then I turned and walked out. In the hallway, Mom was on the phone. Rachel sat in the same plastic chair chewing a nail. No one stopped me as I passed, but just as I reached the elevator, a nurse caught up. He's stable, she said. The fever's coming down, he'll recover. I nodded. I didn't feel relief. I felt distance. The court had cleared my name. The hospital had cleared his lungs, but none of that could clear what had been said. What had been broken? The world didn't end after the ruling, it just got quieter. The court order arrived in the mail 4 days later, neatly typed, no nonsense, stamped in red, restitution awarded to respondent. Claimants fined for slander and perjury. It didn't say your family lied about you. But it didn't need to. Ms. Denning called to walk me through it. You don't need to do anything, she said. The judge ruled for monetary penalties, not criminal charges. Civil fines, forced restitution, and property rights secured. I nodded, even though she couldn't see it. And Rachel, she has 30 days to liquidate assets, she said. Starting with the car. That was the part I hadn't expected to sting. Not that she had to sell it, but that it took a legal gavel to make her do what conscience never could. That Friday, I stayed home. I worked remotely, stacked old receipts for shredding, and tried not to think about hospital rooms or courthouse chairs. I was halfway through organizing my desk drawer when I saw a flash of movement outside the window. Rachel, pulling into the curb in that white Honda, the same car they all once bragged about, smiling like the world had rewarded them for their loyalty to each other. Now the windows were cracked, the shine dulled. The kind of car that had been washed less and driven more through guilt than pride. She opened the trunk, pulling out a single box, books, a lamp, one of those fake marble organizers she always said made her feel grown up. I opened the front door just as she slammed the trunk shut. You're selling it today? I asked. She nodded without looking at me. Guys meeting me at the dealership already gave me a quote. You could have listed it for more, I said. Private sale might have. I just want it gone, she muttered. Stood there 2 feet apart, on the same pavement we'd once played hopscotch on with sidewalk chalk and scraped knees. I didn't come to fight, she added after a pause. I came to drop this off. She held out a plastic envelope, my old textbook, a sweater, and a photo of us at the lake when we were kids. Back when things were simple, before money and illness and betrayal carved our names into legal records. I thought you might still want this stuff, she said, voice low. I took the envelope. Thanks. Hesitated, then looked at the condo behind me. He's resting at the rehab center, she said. They moved him yesterday, said he's responding to therapy. I nodded. Good, they say he'll walk again. Good, I repeated. She shifted her weight. We're staying in a rental a few blocks from the hospital. Mom found it online. It's small. I waited. But there was no apology in her voice, just exhaustion. Hard to feel big when the walls finally close in, I said. She didn't respond to that. Instead, she opened the car door and paused, hand on the handle. He's different, she said without turning around. He doesn't talk much, but when he does, it's softer. I said nothing. She added, you don't have to visit, but I think he hopes you will. And then she drove off. I stood there for a long time, watching the street swallow the Honda whole. That night, I lit a candle, one of the fancy ones I used to save for when guests came over. I poured a glass of wine, sat on my balcony, and listened to the city hum below. Somewhere in a rehab room, my father was learning to walk again. Somewhere in a cramped rental, my mother was folding clothes that didn't belong in a suitcase. And somewhere in between all that, Rachel was learning what it meant to earn instead of take. And me, I was just learning to be still. Not angry, not vindicated, not even victorious. Just still. It had been 3 quiet days. No calls, no texts. No unexpected knocks. I should have known that silence wasn't peace, it was buildup. It was the still air before a summer storm breaks wide open. I'd just come back from the grocery store, arms full of small comforts, coffee, candles, the good peanut butter I used to feel guilty buying when I saw them. My mother and Rachel, sitting on the steps of my condo building like they were waiting for judgment or salvation. Maybe both. Mom looked smaller than I remembered, not in stature but in presence. She had that look she used to get after funerals. Tear-streaked, lips pressed tight, hands twisting a tissue that had long since stopped being useful. Rachel was beside her, eyes red, knees pulled to her chest like she was trying to fold herself into a shape that could disappear. I didn't speak. I just stopped on the sidewalk, keys frozen in my hand. Mom rose first. "We lost everything," she said. The wind carried her voice, shaky but unmistakable. "Everything we thought we owned, it's gone." Rachel stood slowly behind her. "We're being evicted from the rental," she said. "They're selling the house we used to have, the one we borrowed against. All the savings went to the lawyers and the fines." I stayed silent. Mom took a shaky step toward me. "I know we don't deserve kindness," she said. "I know we hurt you, but your father's still recovering and we have nowhere to go until we can figure out what to do." Her voice cracked. "We were wrong, Emily, about all of it." I looked at them, at the 2 people who twisted the truth, sued me, buried urgent diagnoses under a shiny new car and years of denial. And yet here they were, stripped of everything but remorse. I let the silence stretch. Then I took a breath and said quietly, "You can stay until Dad's better." Rachel let out a soft gasp like she'd been holding it in for days, but I raised a hand before either of them could speak. "This is my house," I said clearly. "You follow my rules. No guilt. No entitlement. No passive-aggressive comments or whispered accusations when the lights are off. You cook, you clean, you contribute." They nodded slowly, cautiously, like they weren't sure if they'd imagined the invitation. "Bedrooms are assigned," I added. "No arguments, you stay out of my office. You don't go through my mail. And if I hear a single word about how I've changed since all this started," I paused, "I'll change the locks." Mom pressed a trembling hand to her mouth and nodded again. Rachel whispered, "Thank you." I turned and opened the door. They followed me inside. They didn't speak. They didn't look around like they used to, scanning for weaknesses or reasons to criticize. They just moved carefully like people crossing a bridge they didn't deserve to stand on. I showed them to the guest room. 1 bed, 1 shared dresser. I didn't apologize for the size. I didn't offer them tea. I just stood in the doorway and said, "I expect respect, nothing more, nothing less." And then I closed the door behind me. For the first time, this house felt like mine, not just in title but in energy, in balance. They'd come asking for shelter, but they were finally asking on my terms. The hospital smelled like antiseptic and old breath mints. I hadn't been inside since the night everything crumbled, the night Mom pointed at me and said, "You see what you did." But now, after the court's gavel and Rachel's car sale and 2 weeks of uneasy cohabitation, it was discharge day. My father was finally coming home, and this time I was the one picking him up. I walked past nurses in pink scrubs and residents tapping tablets, carrying nothing but my keys and a folded jacket for him. The hallway was longer than I remembered. I stopped outside room 814 and knocked once. A nurse peeked out, smiled softly. "He's ready. Just finished the last check." I stepped inside. There he was, my father, Leonard Carter, once proud, once brimming with quiet authority, now smaller, pale but alert, hands gripping the wheels of a hospital-grade chair. He looked up when I entered, and for the first time in months, he didn't look angry, just tired, and maybe, just maybe, relieved. I held out the jacket. "It's cold today," he nodded, took it with shaking hands. "Thanks." The nurse left us alone with a quiet, "Take your time." I waited until the door clicked shut before speaking. "You're cleared to come home," I said. "They've got the rehab center prepped. I set up everything you'll need." He studied me for a long moment. Then he wheeled himself forward a few inches and whispered, "I fought the wrong war." I didn't speak. "I thought protecting Rachel, protecting your mother, meant holding the line," he said, voice raspy. "I didn't see what it cost you." My throat tightened. "You nearly died hating the one person who tried to save you," I said quietly. He looked down. "I did." I stepped beside him and took the chair handles. He let me. Together, we moved slowly down the hallway. And just as we reached the elevator, he looked back at me and asked, "You still think I don't deserve forgiveness?" I pressed the down button. The light blinked once. "I think," I said, "you don't get to ask for it just because you're sorry." He swallowed hard. "Fair." The elevator doors slid open. We entered. I waited until we were alone, just us, just the hum of machinery around us before I added, "Next time, read the fine print before you cash the check." He let out a soft, bitter chuckle. "I will," he said. When we stepped out, the world outside looked the same. But I didn't, and I don't think he did either. The invitation came in the form of a text. No emojis, no guilt, no strings. "Mom, dinner this Sunday, if you're free." I stared at it for a long time. There was no please. No, we need to talk. Just a table, a date, and the smallest olive branch I'd ever seen. And for some reason I said yes. Not because I'd forgotten what they did. Not because I needed their validation. But because, somehow, I wanted to see what apology looked like without the performance. The new place was half the size of the old one. One story, vinyl siding. No flower beds, just a porch light that flickered when I knocked. The door opened to the smell of stew, my favorite, though no one said so. Rachel was the first to greet me. "Hey," she said, her voice light but careful. She wore an apron that said, "This is why we can't have nice things." I raised an eyebrow. She smirked. It was the closest we'd come to a truce. Inside, the table was already set. Mismatched silverware, chipped plates, paper napkins folded neatly. My father was there, sitting straight-backed with a walker by his side. His face was still pale, but his eyes were clearer. No fire, no fight, just presence. "Emily," he said softly, nodding. I nodded back. "Dad." Mom moved around the kitchen quietly, ladling stew into bowls. There was no small talk, no awkward silence filled with weather or work updates. Just a shared understanding that words hadn't fixed anything, but maybe this meal could start to. We ate in near silence, the kind that feels intentional, reverent. And then, just as I stood to bring my bowl to the sink, Rachel reached into a drawer and pulled out a small white envelope. She passed it across the table to me, her fingers trembling just slightly. I opened it. Inside was a plain thank you card. No glitter, no flourish. Just one short sentence written in careful block letters. "Thank you for not giving up on what was right." Underneath, 3 signatures. Rachel, Mom, Dad, no money, no promises, just ink and effort. And for the first time in what felt like a year, I smiled without suspicion. Not because everything was healed. Not because trust had been rebuilt, but because, finally, they weren't pretending. They were simply trying, and for now that was enough. A year. It's strange how fast that word can fall out of your mouth when the days it's made have felt like they'd never end. 12 months ago, I was sitting across from my mother as she told me, smiling, that my insurance money had been spent on a car. Now I was smoothing the hem of a black dress outside the town community center, waiting to walk into a fundraiser my father had organized himself. It was surreal, all of it. Inside, the air buzzed with voices and folding chairs. The Support Patient Families banner hung crooked across the back wall, and a high school jazz quartet played covers of pop songs with offbeat charm. But the room was full, and the people were smiling. Rachel stood at the check-in table with a clipboard and a lanyard. Her hair was pulled back, no makeup, sleeves rolled. She looked busy, comfortable, real. When she saw me, she gave a soft wave, not performative, not forced, just there. Mom sat 2 rows from the front, her hands clasped tightly around a small donation envelope. She didn't rush over, she didn't cry. She just nodded when our eyes met, and I nodded back. Then Dad wheeled up to the stage. He didn't need the chair full-time anymore, but the nerves of public speaking gave him an excuse to lean on something. "Good evening," he said into the mic, his voice softer but clearer than I'd ever heard it. "Some of you know me as Leonard Carter. Some of you know me as a patient, a friend, or the guy who always steals the lemon muffins from the rehab snack cart." Laughter rippled through the room. "But tonight, I'm just a man who's grateful to be here. Because a year ago, I nearly wasn't." I was scanning the audience, then stopped on me. "And I'm only standing here, literally and figuratively, because of one person." My stomach tightened. He gestured toward me. My daughter, Emily. A slow, warm wave of applause followed as heads turned in my direction. I felt my face flush, my heart stutter. She fought for the truth when it would have been easier to walk away. She held us accountable when no one else dared to. And because of her, I learned that justice doesn't always look like a courtroom. Sometimes it looks like a second chance. He motioned for me to join him. I didn't plan on speaking, but something in me said, "This is the moment you close the door your way." I stepped onto the stage, took the mic, cleared my throat. "I used to think justice was about being proven right," I said slowly. "But sometimes it's about finally being seen, not as a villain, not as a scapegoat, just as yourself." The room was quiet. I looked out at my family. They didn't try to own my words. They didn't nod too hard or cry on cue, they just listened. And for once, that was enough. "Thank you," I said simply, and stepped down. As I passed Rachel, she reached out and gave my hand a quick, gentle squeeze. No speech, no performance, just a sister trying. Could your family ever truly see you after all the damage? Would you take that step onto the stage or stay in the crowd? Tell me in the comments. And thank you for being with me through every chapter of this story. If you've ever had to choose truth over comfort, I hope you found something in this journey that made you feel less alone.